Right now, somewhere in your yard, in the cracks of your driveway, along your fence line, at the edges of your garden, plants are growing that you've spent years trying to destroy. You've pulled them out, sprayed them, covered them with mulch, and every single spring they come back. What if those plants are more nutritious than anything you're carefully growing in your raised beds? What if the thing you've been calling a weed is actually more valuable than the crops you paid to plant? Because hidden in plain sight in the spaces, you ignore the soil, you didn't prepare the areas, you don't water. There's a system already working. A food system. These are plants that cost nothing. They don't need fertilizer. They don't need irrigation. They don't need protection. And they don't ask for permission to grow. They return every year, whether you want them or not. In this video, we're going to look at 6 of the most common plants you already have, and why they outperform traditional garden crops in ways most people never consider. Calories, nutrients, resilience, and one thing no seed catalog will ever sell you: zero input survival. By the end of this, you may never look at your lawn the same way again, and you might start asking a different question. Not how do I get rid of these, but why were they here in the first place? Before we get into the plants themselves, it's important to understand what you're really looking at. This isn't just a list of edible weeds. It's a system that exists without your help. Every plant in this video shares a few key traits. They grow without being planted. They survive without being watered. They return every year without being replanted. And most importantly, they produce something useful: food, nutrients, soil improvement, medicine, all without requiring input. No seed packets, no fertilizer schedules, no irrigation systems, no protection from pests. In fact, many of these plants thrive because they're ignored. They grow in poor soil. They tolerate extreme temperatures. They fill the gaps where cultivated crops struggle. This is what makes them different from a traditional garden. A garden is something you build and maintain. This system builds itself. And once it's established, it doesn't depend on you to continue. That doesn't mean it replaces everything. These plants won't give you the calorie density of potatoes or grains, but they fill critical gaps: micronutrients, early season greens, resilience under stress, things most gardens fail at. So instead of thinking of these plants as competition, start thinking of them as the foundation you already have. Because once you recognize that, you stop fighting them, and you start using them. Let's start with the one that's probably closest to you right now. Dandelion, the plant most people spend time and money trying to eliminate. Before modern lawn culture turned it into a problem, dandelion was something else entirely. It was a crop. European settlers didn't accidentally bring dandelion to North America. They brought it on purpose. They planted it intentionally because it was useful. Now compare that to today. A plant that was once transported across an ocean as a food source is now sprayed with herbicides every spring. So what changed? Not the plant, just the perception. Because nutritionally, dandelion is hard to ignore. A single 100-gram serving of dandelion greens contains over 500% of your daily recommended vitamin K. It also delivers more beta-carotene than carrots, more calcium per calorie than milk, significant levels of vitamins A and C, and unlike most vegetables, every part of the plant is usable. The leaves, especially in early spring, are tender and slightly bitter, similar to arugula. The flowers can be eaten raw or cooked. The roots can be roasted and used as a coffee substitute, or dried for traditional herbal use. Now compare that to something like spinach. Spinach requires prepared soil, consistent watering, protection from heat and pests, and replanting every season. Dandelion requires none of that. It grows through compacted soil. It survives frost. It produces for months at a time. And it comes back every year from a deep taproot that can reach nearly half a meter into the ground. You don't need to save seeds. It saves itself. Every white seed head you've ever blown apart is a built-in distribution system, ensuring it spreads, survives, and returns. Which leads to a simple realization. This isn't a fragile crop. It's a permanent one. And while most people are trying to remove it from their yard, it's already trying to feed them. If dandelion is about vitamins, then what comes next fills a gap most plant-based diets struggle with. Omega-3 fatty acids. This is purslane. At first glance, it doesn't look like food. It looks like a weed that somehow slipped into your garden bed, low to the ground with thick, succulent leaves and reddish stems. Most people pull it out and throw it away. What they're removing is one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids known. Purslane contains roughly 300 to 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per 100 grams. That's more than any other leafy green. To put that in perspective, many people spend money on fish oil supplements to get the same nutrient, while this plant grows for free, right where they're standing. But its value isn't just nutritional, it's structural. Purslane is a C4 plant, which means it thrives under conditions that stress or destroy most common vegetables. Heat, drought, poor soil. When your lettuce bolts and your tomatoes start to struggle in peak summer, purslane is just getting started. It prefers neglect. It grows aggressively in disturbed soil, along garden edges, and between cultivated plants. And once it's established, it doesn't need you. In terms of use, it's surprisingly versatile. Raw, it has a mild, slightly lemony flavor crisp and refreshing in salads. Cooked, it softens like spinach and can be added to soups, stir-fries, or stews. In many parts of the world, from the Mediterranean to the Middle East, it's not considered a weed at all. It's a vegetable, a valued one. Now here's the key point. Purslane won't replace your calorie crops, but it fills something they don't provide. Essential fats, micronutrients, resilience in harsh conditions. It's not competing with your garden, it's completing it. And while most people are pulling it out and discarding it, it keeps coming back, offering the same thing again and again. If purslane fills the gap for healthy fats, this next plant moves into something even harder to replace: protein and grain. This is lamb's quarters. You've probably seen it without realizing what it is. Tall, pale green leaves, a slightly dusty powder-like coating on new growth, growing quickly in disturbed soil along fences, construction edges, and the borders of your garden beds. At a glance, it looks like something that doesn't belong, but historically it did. Long before modern agriculture, indigenous communities across North America cultivated lamb's quarters intentionally, not just for its leaves, but for its seeds. Because those seeds function much like a grain. In fact, lamb's quarters is closely related to quinoa. And like quinoa, it produces small, nutrient-dense seeds that can be dried, cooked, or ground into flour. A single mature plant can produce tens of thousands of seeds in one season. Now look at the leaves. Per 100 grams, they contain around 4 grams of protein, higher than spinach. They're also rich in iron, calcium, vitamins A and C, and they cook the same way. Saute them. Steam them. Use them anywhere you'd use leafy greens. The taste is mild, slightly earthy, and often more tender than cultivated alternatives. But what makes lamb's quarters especially valuable isn't just nutrition, it's where it grows. This plant thrives in disturbed soil. The exact kind of soil you create when you build raised beds, dig new garden plots, or turn over earth. Which means if you're gardening, it's probably already there. And once it appears, it tends to stay. It reseeds aggressively. It adapts quickly. And it doesn't require maintenance. While you're spending time managing crops just a few feet away, this plant is producing food on its own, quietly, consistently, and for free. At first glance, most people don't even recognize this plant. It looks like clover. Small, low to the ground. Clusters of delicate heart-shaped leaves spreading across shaded areas of your yard. So it gets ignored. Or worse, mowed down without a second thought. But this isn't clover. This is wood sorrel. And once you taste it, you understand why it matters. Bite into a leaf and you'll notice it immediately. A bright citrus-like tang. Sharp. Fresh. Almost like lemon. That flavor comes from natural compounds found in the plant. And it's also a signal. Wood sorrel is a natural source of vitamin C. And that matters more than most people realize. Historically, vitamin C deficiency wasn't about lack of food. It was about lack of fresh plant material. Sailors didn't die from starvation. They died from scurvy, because they didn't have access to plants like this. Wood sorrel grows where most edible plants struggle. Partial shade, under trees, along fence lines, in the cooler, darker edges of your garden. Spaces you don't usually plant, spaces you often ignore, and yet it fills those gaps. You can eat it raw in salads, use it to add acidity to dishes, treat it like a natural alternative to lemon in small amounts. Even children tend to recognize it as edible, instinctively drawn to the sour taste. It's one of the earliest plants to appear in spring, and one of the last to disappear in fall, which means it provides something many gardens don't: continuity. Not in large quantities, but in the moments when you need it most. And like everything else on this list, it doesn't need you. It just needs to be noticed. If the previous plants feed you, this one feeds the soil. Clover. It's everywhere, mixed into lawns, spreading across open ground, cut down over and over again, without most people ever asking what it's doing there. Because clover isn't just another plant, it's a system. Beneath the surface, its roots host specialized bacteria that perform a critical function. They pull nitrogen directly from the air and convert it into a form that plants can use. This process is called nitrogen fixation. It's the same reason beans are often planted in crop rotation. But clover does it differently. It's perennial, it spreads naturally, and it works continuously, without needing to be replanted each season. A dense patch of clover isn't just covering your lawn, it's actively improving the soil underneath it, every single day. Before synthetic fertilizers became common, farmers didn't treat clover as a weed. They planted it intentionally to restore depleted land, to rebuild fertility, to prepare fields for future crops. It was part of the system. Now it's often removed because it doesn't match the aesthetic of a uniform lawn. But its value hasn't changed. Young clover leaves can be eaten raw in small amounts. The flowers, both red and white, are edible and can be dried for tea. Red clover in particular has been studied for compounds called isoflavones, linked to hormonal balance and cardiovascular health. Even the seeds have value. They can be sprouted indoors in just a few days, providing fresh greens when nothing else is growing. And once clover is established, it stays, spreading slowly, fixing nitrogen, improving soil, without asking anything in return. Which means while most people are buying fertilizer to feed their garden, this plant has been doing it for free, right under their feet. There's a moment every year that most people don't think about, but in a true survival situation, it's the most dangerous one. Late winter into early spring. Stored food is running low, the ground is still cold, and nothing you've planted is ready yet. This is the gap. And most gardens can't fill it. But chickweed can. Chickweed is a small, low-growing plant with tiny white, star-shaped flowers. You've seen it. It spreads in dense mats across garden edges, lawn borders, and disturbed soil. But what makes it different isn't just where it grows. It's when it grows. Chickweed begins appearing in late winter, sometimes as early as February or March, depending on the climate. Weeks before your first crops. Weeks before your seeds even germinate. And during that window, it produces food. Fresh edible greens, mild in flavor, soft in texture, often compared to baby spinach. Nutritionally, it provides vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, iron. It's also been used traditionally for its anti-inflammatory properties applied to skin or consumed as part of herbal remedies. But its real value is timing. Chickweed doesn't compete with your summer crops. By the time your garden is fully active, it's already fading back. It occupies a space in the calendar that most cultivated plants never reach, and once it appears, it stays. Each plant produces hundreds of seeds. Those seeds can remain viable in soil for years, which means once chickweed is in your system, it becomes permanent, returning every late winter, providing food when nothing else does, without planning, without planting, just showing up exactly when it's needed most. Now step back for a moment, because individually, each of these plants is useful, but together, they form something much more powerful. A system. Think about what they cover. Dandelion provides dense vitamins and minerals. Purslane fills the gap for omega-3 fatty acids. Lamb's quarters adds protein and grain potential. Wood sorrel delivers vitamin C, especially in shaded spaces. Clover improves the soil itself, fixing nitrogen continuously. Chickweed appears early, filling the seasonal gap when nothing else grows. Different roles, different strengths, but no overlap. Each one occupies a space in time, in soil, or in nutrition that the others don't. And that's what makes it work. This isn't a monoculture, it's a layered system. One plant grows in early spring, another peaks in summer heat. One thrives in shade, another in disturbed soil. One feeds you, another feeds the ground. Together, they create continuity, not maximum yield in a single moment, but consistent availability over time. And that's something most gardens struggle with, because traditional gardening often focuses on control, planting specific crops, managing specific outcomes, working against variability. But this system does the opposite. It adapts. It fills gaps automatically. It responds to conditions. It stabilizes itself. And once it's there, it doesn't disappear. You don't build it from scratch. You recognize it, because in many cases, it's already growing, right where you are. Now consider this. The average household spends hundreds of dollars every year maintaining a lawn, mowing, fertilizing, spraying herbicides, all to remove plants that don't fit a certain image. But look closely at what's being removed. Dandelion nutrient-dense food. Purslane rich in omega-3s. Lamb's quarters, protein and grain potential. Clover natural soil fertility. Chickweed early season greens. Together they form a system that produces food without cost, and yet we pay to destroy it. Not because it's harmful, but because it doesn't match the standard. A uniform lawn, clean, controlled, predictable. But that image comes with a trade-off, because the system we're protecting, the one built on purchased seeds, fertilizers, and seasonal inputs, is the fragile one. It depends on timing, on weather, on supply chains, on continuous maintenance. Remove those, and it stops working. The weeds don't. They survive drought. They return after frost. They grow in poor soil. They adapt. They've survived every agricultural system we've built around them, and they'll likely survive whatever comes next, which creates a strange contradiction. We spend money to eliminate the most resilient food system available to us while investing in one that requires constant support to survive. Not because it's better, but because it's familiar. At this point, nothing here is hidden anymore. These plants are common. They're already growing around you. And their value, nutritional, ecological, and practical, is well within reach. So the question isn't whether they exist, and it's not whether they work, because clearly they do. The real question is simpler. Why haven't you been using them? Part of it is habit. We've been taught to see certain plants as useful and others as problems, to plant what's sold to us and remove what grows on its own. But what if that perspective is incomplete? What if some of the most reliable food sources aren't the ones you buy, but the ones that never needed to be planted in the first place? Because once you start paying attention, really paying attention, you begin to notice something different. These plants aren't random. They're consistent. They're resilient. And they show up exactly where they're needed, which leaves you with a choice. You can keep treating them as something to eliminate, or you can start seeing them for what they are, a system that's already working, right outside your door. So the next time you see one of these plants growing in your yard, you might want to ask yourself, is this a weed or is this food? I haven't learned how to use yet.